about this eruption was that it was not lava that buried these cities. If it had been, they would have been wiped out. I'm in Pompeii, and it was because it was this stuff, pumice and ash, that buried this place, that it's been preserved and frozen in time for nearly 2,000 years and captured everyone's imagination. The houses and the streets stand today as a lasting reminder of everyday life in a busy Roman city, a unique snapshot of a comfortable and highly developed lifestyle. Pompeii has yielded both wonderful and heartrending insights into how the Romans lived and died. Perhaps this is what most sticks in people's minds when they think of Pompeii, the last agony of an ordinary human being, captured so vividly in plaster. Later in the programme, we'll be discovering not just how these people died, but how their bodies were preserved. We'll also be going behind the scenes, into areas that the public never see, to reveal what made the Romans live so well.
I'm in Herculaneum, just a few kilometres from Pompeii. It's a coastal town, smaller than its more famous neighbour, but in many ways even more interesting. When Vesuvius erupted, Herculaneum was buried by this stuff, volcanic material known as pyroclastic mud. So far, only a quarter of the site has actually been excavated. I'm standing here where the beach would have been in Roman times. If you look up there, you can see how over 20 metres of molten mud and rock completely engulfed the whole town. But Herculaneum is crumbling. For the last year and a half, Five has been following the progress of the Herculaneum Conservation Project, who are striving to save this site. Already, they've made some remarkable discoveries. In May last year, work began clearing the Roman beach area at the foot of the House of the Telephus relief. This is thought to be where Nonius Balbus and his family lived, having one of the finest sea views in Herculaneum. An earlier excavation had revealed what looked like the skeletons of a baby and a dog. So this time, the team were more cautious than usual. In September of last year, we were called back. No bones yet, but what they had found was a huge piece of the three-storey colonnaded building hurled into the sea by the angry volcano.
You've got the entire anatomy of the destruction of the portico up above us. Here you have a great column. You can see the base of the column. You can see the shaft of the column disappearing downwards because it's been thrust downwards by the force of the eruption. And there are bits of tiles, roof tiles probably, and here's a great wooden beam, another great wooden beam under it. So you've got all the structures from up there thrown down by the force of the eruption.
Incredible. I mean, it really shows you the force, doesn't it? That's what is so interesting about this.
Yes, it's an avalanche of solid rock, but liquid rock, just flowing through the site, and everything that can be swept away by it is swept down.
It's extraordinary. And tonight we're going to see the results of that very important rescue work. I'm with Andrew again, who's the director of the project. Andrew, tell me, why is the work that you're doing here so important?
Well, this site is incredibly precious. It opens a unique window on the ancient world, but at the same time it's very, very fragile. When this project started, it was literally falling to pieces. There were roofs broken, frescoes falling from the walls, weeds growing everywhere. And what we're trying to do is stop that.
So how did the site get into such a place where it really needed your help?
Well, what people don't understand is that archaeology creates a risk. They think of archaeology as something that saves the past from being buried, but it doesn't. It exposes the past to destruction. And unless you put money and effort into conserving it, maintaining it, looking after it, and this is very, very expensive, no politician ever understands, you will lose it to a second destruction.
So just so I understand this, you're saying that the minute the site gets excavated, it starts on a cycle of decay instantly?
It does.
I mean, well, listen, we'll see more of the team's work later, so join us with them later.
Later in this special live programme, we'll be revealing in detail what happened when Vesuvius erupted.
The energy is in the order of tens of nuclear explosions.
we have privileged access to a house in Pompeii where we witness a poignant moment just before the city died. And do you think he escaped? Our behind-the-scenes tour also includes a storeroom in Herculaneum, full of exquisite artifacts.
It's a loaf of bread.
A loaf of Roman bread.
I wouldn't recommend you eat it.
And we'll be going into one of Herculaneum's most important buildings, still buried by the volcano, the Basilica, to reveal its latest secrets. And with me here tonight is Guy de la Bedouillère, historian and expert on Rome and everything Roman. Now, Guy, what is it that excites you so much about Pompeii?
Peter, every time I've come here over the last 30 years, walking through the gate into this place is like walking through a portal into the Roman Empire, a time machine.
And just give us a picture, before we start the story of what happened to those people on that dreadful day. Give us a picture of what they're doing. It's lunchtime, 24th of August, AD 79.
Let's put it into context. Pompeii is a Roman city. Like every Roman city, it's got all the public buildings, the forum, the marketplace, the basilica. It's got theatres, the amphitheatre. It's got shops, brothels, laundries. Everything is going on. But on the 24th of August, it's an extremely hot and sultry day. It's the middle of the day. Perhaps some people are just finishing up work for the morning, thinking about the midday meal. Others are planning perhaps an afternoon in the baths, where they're going to cut some deals, meet their friends, that sort of thing. But then, it all goes wrong.
And they have no idea what's going to happen. And that's the story we'll be telling right the way through this programme. Thank you, Guy.
Later in the programme, we'll see just how well preserved these cities are. But first, what drew people to live in a place right underneath a deadly volcano?
The ancient cities of Pompeii and Herculaneum were built literally in the shadow of Mount Vesuvius. Pompeii lies just 6 or 7 miles off there to the southeast, while the smaller city of Herculaneum is even closer, just 4 or 5 miles off there to the southwest. Thanks to the minerals spewed out by Vesuvius over many thousands of years, the soil around here is extraordinarily fertile. All sorts of crops flourish here, in particular the grape and the olive. And the Roman poet Martial described the area as green with shady vines, the sort of place, as he put it, where the noble grape packed the sodden vats. Wine has always been a particularly important export from this area. It was the soil and the agricultural abundance around here that first drew settlers here up to 3,000 years ago. Centuries before the Romans conquered this area, it was occupied by the Etruscans, the Greeks, and the Samnites. But there was one problem. The region's great fertility came at a terrible price: the ever-present threat of volcanic eruption. There have been over 100 eruptions of Vesuvius in the last 6,000 years. The most infamous, the one that buried Pompeii and Herculaneum in 79 AD. So at that moment, where are we in the spectacular story of the rise and fall of Rome? Rome's history starts in 753 BC with the legend of Romulus and Remus. 509 and the Republic is established, but the rise to power is a struggle. In 390, the Gauls sack the city, but 146 marks Rome's final destruction of her arch-rival Carthage and the conquest of Greece. The chaos of the Republic's last days doesn't end till 31 BC and the Battle of Actium, won by Octavian, who becomes Rome's first emperor, Augustus. AD 43, the conquest of Britain. Then 79, the eruption of Vesuvius. 117 marks the Roman Empire at its greatest extent, stretching from Britain to Egypt and Spain to Iraq. The long, slow decline follows. Rome falls to barbarians in 410 AD, and in 476 the empire in the west collapses, by which time Pompeii and Herculaneum had been buried for nearly 400 years. But back in 79 AD, when Vesuvius erupted and the cities were frozen in time, the Roman Empire was still at the peak of its power. Surely the highly advanced and civilized people who lived here must have realized the danger they were living in. Living right under an active volcano must have seemed suicidal. It may look to us like shocking complacency, but to be fair to them, in 79 AD, Vesuvius hadn't had a major eruption for over 800 years, and it was well beyond the span of human memory. The last eruption was almost as remote to the citizens of the Bay of Naples as the Battle of Hastings is to us today.
Join us after the break when we'll be taking you into the very heart of these cities.
Welcome back. Well, while most of Herculaneum is still buried, a great deal of Pompeii has been excavated. Let's just go back now to life prior by hour, through the eruption that suffocated Pompeii and roasted Herculaneum. And how hot is it?
At least 500 degrees.
Well, while most of Herculaneum is still buried, a great deal of Pompeii has been excavated. Let's just go back now to life prior to the eruption in Pompeii. And we now know that the day before the town came to such a brutal and unforeseen end, there was actually local election campaigning in full swing. Nothing ever changes. Here in Italy, just 2 days ago, they were holding a referendum about whether to reduce the powers of local government. So, let's see what sort of a city Pompeii really was like in Roman times. Here's Guy.
There's so much about Pompeii that's instantly reminiscent of a modern town and city. It had public buildings, places of worship, markets, shops, houses, even a fully fledged public water system. At least 10,000 people lived here, possibly as many as 20,000. So you can imagine the noise of the crowds and the smells and the sights that went with that. There was the urine used for washing clothes, the reek of cooking, and of course, like any self-respecting city, Pompeii had terrible traffic problems. Just look at the cart ruts here, worn down into this road over centuries of commerce and trade. The other thing about the roads, though, is that these were open sewers. Pompeii didn't have buried sewers. The Romans weren't always that brilliant at water management. The filth used to flow down here, so the good burghers of Pompeii walked across on these stepping stones to avoid literally standing in the filth of life that was Pompeii at its height. And that road system in Pompeii is what linked it to the rest of the whole Roman world, including Britain. This is the road that brought traffic in from Herculaneum, just a few miles up the coast. And it brought that traffic down this main road to the heart of Pompeii, the Forum. Now, the Forum was the centre of civic life in every Roman town, and that includes the Roman towns in Britain, like London. It was a political, commercial and religious centre where people came to see and be seen, cut their deals, show their loyalty to Rome. It was a thriving thoroughfare, just like it is today, with all these tourists milling around who could almost be Romans here on market day. There were temples to Jupiter, to Apollo. There was a market for food. There was a market for textiles. There were even once gladiatorial shows on here. It's ruinous because of the earthquake in '62 that had so badly damaged this place 17 years before the eruption of Vesuvius in '79. But if you can imagine those columns up there coming all the way along, there was once an upper story for people to look down on gladiatorial displays. But like every town, Pompeii had to be governed and managed, the people controlled.